welcome to Smokestack Hobby Shop's Models by Murph. Tonight's installment is round 2 of the Dragon 1/6 scale build of the British SAS Jeep. Tonight I prepped the jerry cans, sanded the seams, and they're all ready to go for paint. We're going to prime them and use the salt technique to give it that weathered look. Not too much, but just a bit. So join me now as I break out the airbrush and start spreading some paint. Okay, so here's our jerry cans all prepped and ready to go, and we're going to be priming them, putting some paint down. We're going to use some Vallejo surface primer. I like this. It seems to work well with this thicker, heavier plastic. So we're going to use that. And I've used some Life Color paint, sand paint, that we sell here at the hobby shop, and I like to put it in these mixing bottles. They're handy. They've got a squeeze top to them, just a little easier to dispense your paint. I like just to decant them into that, and I can thin it out, and I can mark on the bottle of what kind of paint it is. And what's nice about them is they're made by Vallejo, and they just really work well, and they're not very expensive at all. And so we're going to do that. I just go ahead and I have my squeeze bottle of cleaner and my Iwata airbrush, and I'm usually airbrushing around 20 to 25 pounds of air pressure, which works well. So, you know, no big deal. And I like to just decant a little bit of that primer in there. And since it is a primer, I just use a little bit of thinner in there, not too much. I like to airbrush without my needle protective piece on there. And if you just squeeze it, you can mix that paint up really well. And then I like to take a spray card, and see how it's spraying. It looks like it's spraying really well. And then we're just going to start spreading a little bit of paint. Got to get into the little nooks and crannies. And I like to take that needle cap off just to be able to get in tight on some of that stuff. And you can see how smooth that Vallejo primer goes on. It really is a good product. And this will help get all that priming done. Give it a nice finish for that acrylic paint to adhere to. As you can see, it covers well. And sometimes you just gotta grab a set of tweezers here. And I like to just grab it right about there. And keep on going with that primer. You don't have to spray it on real thick, just a nice light coat. Primer is all you need. And I guess if you like totally a black can, you guess you could leave it like that, I suppose. But we're not going to do that. Alright, so we're going to let that dry, and Going to prime up this next one. We're going to let those dry out a bit, and then we'll use some chipping color right here from AK Products. This is a nice product, nice color for chipping, and we'll hit various spots that we want to put some light chipping on, and then we'll do our salt technique and overspray and sand. So we'll be back after this is dry. Well, our primer's dry on our jerry cans, so now we can apply some of the AK brush and airbrush acrylic color. This is a chipping paint that we use, and we just need a drop or so in our airbrush, and we can apply that. See how it sprays. And we're going to need a little bit more of that in there. Now with this, you don't have to cover the whole can with this, just the areas that you want to show some wear and tear. And it has a nice weathered look to it. And basically that's all we're done. Just applying a little bit of this color. So when we put our salt down, it'll shine through. And you'll see more. You'll get more of the feeling for it when the salt goes on and you overspray your sand paint. You'll see more of it. And that's about all we need to do. Now that has to dry thoroughly before we can go ahead and apply our salt. And all this is regular old sea salt. You can buy it from the store in large containers, and a container like that will last you forever. Depending on what you're doing, and all it is just coarse sea salt. And after that's dry, we'll wet it down, we'll sprinkle our salt on it, and then that has to dry also, and then we'll overpaint the tan. So let's let that dry out, and we'll go to the next step. So I decided I want to add a little bit more effect to this chipping color. So what I'm going to do is, since I want it to look more bare metal on these gas cans, I'm going to take a little bit of chipping color and put a little bit in our paint tray. And this is oily steel from Vallejo. We're going to mix a little bit of oily steel in there. And we'll take our brush and just mix it together. And what that kind of creates is a bare metal, and the chipping color kind of tones down the oily steel color. This kind of adds to the effect that we like to see. And you want to thin it a little bit with a little bit of distilled water, or I just use windshield wiper fluid, buy it in a gallon, and you kind of want to unload your brush when you're painting, when you're brush painting. And now I'm just going to go and apply that metal color, I guess, to that gas can lid, and then when we do our salt technique, it'll have varying shades in it, and you don't have to airbrush everything on this. This is kind of like a base coat color, and but I want to get the edges here and some on the handles. Just kind of have to look at it and see where you would actually have wear on the can itself. I think on it, the edges and things like that, it would definitely have wear on as you can see, you know, the difference in the color there. You have just a little bit more metal color, so it's not so rusty when we go to apply the chipping. And you don't have to be real precise with this, because this is, like I said, is an undercoat of paint. So you can be a little sloppy with it, I guess. And you know, these edges here, where the indentation on the can is, you know, you're going to want to put a bit in there. And, so that'll be a nice effect when we go to do the chipping. And you can see exactly what I did on that. I think it'll be a nice effect when we go in and do the next step. Okay, and we'll let that dry. Okay, so I zoomed in a little bit here, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply the salt on this, and we're going to make it basically look like that one. As you can see, it's got the salt already applied, and we'll be quick about this. Put a paper towel down so you don't make a mess, because the salt will make a bit of a mess. Take your brush and just wet it, and all you want to do is wherever you want chipping to be on it, just go in and you want to wet that area down like that, and then take your sea salt and sprinkle it on there, and you can give it a shot of air just to spread it around a little bit. You can always go back in and add more if you want. Shake it off, and you do that over the whole can until it looks pretty much like that. Set it aside and let it dry. Now the next step for this is you're going to overpaint this. Let me get rid of that. And we're going to overpaint this with sand color, your basic color of your vehicle that you want. And we're going to use Life Color, regular old Life Color sand. And we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of color in there, and we'll take our thinner, and you want to mix, you know, I usually mix 2 to 1 on thinner. I don't want to mix it up too heavy. And you take a brush I usually use a brush, or I have these Tamiya paint stirrers, which are really nice. I like that. Remember to use them. And now we got our paint going here. And I'm going to naturally take my tip protector off. And we're going to just over paint that color. And try when you're painting, since it's been primed. Sometimes you don't want to completely paint. Sometimes you want that primer and black to shine through, and that'll give that effect of basically a faded type look. It'll give some of the dark shadows to the object that you're painting. Kind of adds to it. No, I didn't have enough paint there, so we'll mix up a little bit more paint. Sometimes on these bigger models, they take quite a bit more paint up than you expect. That's okay. Give it another stir. And we'll wipe that off. And we'll keep on going. And you can speed up the drying sometimes. Just shoot some air at it. That's what's nice about acrylic paint. Doesn't take that long to dry. Easy cleanup. And you can get all the areas completely painted. And we're going to do added weathering on this too, even after we do our salt technique. We're going to tone it all down with an oil-based wash, burnt umber. Really bring that color out. Okay. That one's complete. Now we're going to let that dry. We're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back in and we take a normal good old toothbrush and we'll take the salt off, and we'll do that in right next step here. The salt's now dried on our jerry can, and the paint that we overpainted is dry. And now we can take the salt off and see exactly how our technique looks. And what's nice about this is if you don't like it, if you don't like the effect, you can always do another layer of it. So you would put the chipping color back on over the sand and just repeat the whole process until you like the effect of how it looks. Just take a toothbrush and we're going to brush off all the salt. You can take your finger also. Sometimes a finger works better, but toothbrush will let you get into all those areas that you can't reach with a finger. And let's see how it looks. And the beauty of this, working with Armor at least on this, is if you scrape at the paint a little bit, guess what? It was in the desert. It's going to get scratched. So no need to worry too much about it. And you can take a knife and get into all the nooks and crannies. And like I said, if you put a little scrape on it, don't freak out, because guess what? It was in the desert. Sometimes I like to do that. Sometimes I'll just go in and I'll put some scrape marks in it or whatever. If you're going to do that, make sure you don't go through all the color that you put on there. And you can see just now how the effect actually looks with that. And it gives a nice look to it. Let me come in tight with it here. And like I said, if you don't like the effect or you don't think you have enough on it, you can always go back in and add to it. Now we're going to put a wash of burnt umber oil base over this after it's completely dried out. And it's still a little fresh right now, so we don't want to hit the wash with it yet. And we can still do this one. And you can see how the effect's going to look. It's a neat effect. I like it. It can be overdone a bit, so you want to be careful of how much you put on there. You got to look at what you're weathering and kind of look at your reference books and see exactly how things are weathered in the desert, and try to emulate that. That makes it look good. Sometimes a little less is more. So we'll go on to the next step, and that's our oil washes. And we'll prep the oil wash and begin that. Now that our salt technique is complete, we're going to put a wash on this. We're going to tone this all together. Tone down the sand a little bit. Give it a little extra color. And what I like to use is, you can use whatever favorite artist oil paints you prefer. Experiment around. Just don't take my advice as far as color issues. I like burnt umber because it just seems like it has a dark tone to it, and it doesn't take a lot. A tube like this will last you literally forever in the model world. I'll take one of my nice Vallejo mixing bottles that I have, and I'll put a little bit of artist oil in there with my brush, and then I just use, a lot of people will use turpentine. I use good old Testor's thinner, enamel thinner, works well, and make a nice light wash with it. You don't want to make it too heavy, and it really does depend on what you want to do with it. And just mix it up in there and get it on your brush, and you can test it on a paper towel to kind of see how it's flowing and how it's going to work for you. And then I just like to go in and hit it with that wash, and it's going to really just bring all the colors together. And it does change the color of sand a bit. So be leery, you know, it's gonna change it a little bit. But what's nice about this is you can go back in, and after it's dry, you can wipe some of it off. And it doesn't take too long to dry, but as far as artist oils go, it will take a little while to go to wash. Now, there are different washes out there. Flory Models makes a nice product that it's clay based and it doesn't take as long to dry. The effects will look a little different depending on what color of wash you get. But you can see, you're probably looking at this and saying, oh my god, he just ruined his paint job. And, you know, if it's not exactly what you like, you can always start over, but it will look a little bit better than this after it's done. You can go back in and streak it a little bit. You can dab it for a different type effect with a paper towel. It's a gas can. It's going to look grungy and grimy and things like that. So it's not going to look consistent. You know, it's not going to have a super consistent look to it. So we'll let that dry out. And what's nice about this, you can always take your airbrush and you can speed up that drying a little bit. For that look. And you can tell the difference already between the washed one and the unwashed one. Okay, so our wash is done, and as you can see, I did two types of washes, a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, and they came out pretty nice. Now they're dry. If you want to do a little cleanup on it, you can take a little bit of thinner, and all you need to do is take a brush on a paper towel or a cotton swab, put just a drop or so of the thinner there on it, and you can just take that and you just swipe down with it, and that does a little bit of a cleanup on the wash itself, depending on how streaky you want it. Works well on that, and you may have to do that a little bit more on the wash itself. And it just cleans up just like that. Now, what I like to see though is sometimes I like to put a little extra wash on this, and I have my wash mixed up here, and I like to just take a little extra and maybe just do a little bit of extra wash, and you can just leave it run down like that, like it was a gas stain or a fuel stain that ran down the gas tank. And that's always kind of a neat technique there. Because, you know, they wouldn't normally have perfectly clean gas tank. And we can do that on both of them. You don't have to particularly do it too much. on one or the other. Just do whatever you like to do on it. Like make it run different ways, maybe. Just a different stain, maybe. Which is a neat effect to have. Okay. That's our completed fuel tanks with the chipping effect and the stains and the wear and tear and weather. And I think they came out really nice. And that pretty much wraps up this tutorial on the salt technique and weathering. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.